If I could have one lens in my camera bag, it would have to be this one right here. The Tamron 28-75 2.8 aperture lens. And let me tell you why. Welcome back to a new era, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that B-roll sequence. If you did, make sure to click that subscribe button because I would love to have you along on this journey. And on top of that, if you guys want to know what pieces of camera gear I use to film my sequences, go ahead and check out the link in the description below. I have a whole video on that. But anyways, that's not what this video is about. This video is about this Tamron lens and why you need it as a weapon of choice in your camera kit. Let's go. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the ergonomics of this lens. And what that means is basically how it feels, because everybody wants a lens that feels good. So this Tamron lens has a plastic build, unlike a lot of other Sony lenses which have a metal build. However, in my opinion, despite it not being real metal, it still feels really good. It still feels very professional. And because it's a plastic build, it weighs 550 grams. So the super good thing about the 550 grams is that when you put it, for example, on your gimbal, on your DJI Ronin or whatever it is, you can put this lens on, balance the whole gimbal, and then still zoom your lens in and out while you're on the gimbal, and the gimbal will still stay balanced at any focal length without having to take the lens off because of how lightweight it is. Also, the zoom ring and the focus ring on this lens feels really solid. I personally have never had any issue with the zoom and focus rings, and because of how sturdy and how solid these rings are, yet loose enough to precisely move them, I've never had any issues while I'm manual focusing or even autofocusing and zooming in for that matter. Also, I don't know if you guys can see this, but they basically weather sealed the lens, so you can shoot in a lot of weather conditions without having any rain or snow or whatever get inside the lens. I actually just used this in light rain for that B-roll sequence you guys saw earlier in the video, and it was super helpful because I didn't have to worry about anything getting in, not even dust for that matter. So that's really nice. So all in all, for ergonomics, this lens feels really good. It lets you be really precise when you're using the zoom and focus rings, and it's light enough that your gimbal or your hands can handle the weight for a long time on your camera. I'd give it at least an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10 just going off of how it feels. So now that we know it feels really good, let's talk about its focal length. This lens in particular has a focal length of 28-75 millimeters. Now what I hear a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you have also heard if you've watched a lot of other reviews, is that it's not wide enough. It doesn't hit that 24 millimeter sweet spot. Now my thoughts on the 24 millimeters is that if you're vlogging constantly, then yes, you might need the 24 millimeters because you're trying to record yourself up so close and you need that wide range at such a close distance to your face. So that makes sense. But if you're just shooting landscapes or wide angles, or even in my case, I particularly shoot dance videos, then you don't really need that 24 millimeters. That's just very circumstantial. In fact, you'd probably crop in more after you've recorded on 24 millimeters. So 28 millimeters is more than enough for a wide angle. And on top of that, this lens can zoom into 75 millimeters, which means it's really good for any close angle, any portrait video or photography, as well as product video and photography. And because you can push it to 75 millimeters, you could do a lot of cool manual focus shots. And what makes the ability of being able to zoom from 28 to 75 millimeters so powerful in this particular lens is that you can get super close to your subject. And I'm talking about like 5 to 6 inches or centimeters away. So you can get super close to your subject and start getting some awesome shots. Another thing that amplifies the fact that it has such a good range of focal lengths is the fact that its aperture is 2.8. So you're going to be getting a lot of good bokeh as well as a lot of good blur when you use those really low apertures. And this allows you to be super creative in your shots or video because you've got the range and the focal length, you've got how close you can get to your subject, and you've got your bokeh and your blur. I would consider this lens one of the most versatile, if not the most versatile, in all of the lenses I've ever had. So now what comes into question is the autofocus of this beast. When this lens first came out, it actually did have an autofocusing issue, but since then they've released a firmware update which basically fixes the autofocus. And I can tell you right now, It's really good. So here's a clip of me testing the autofocus and in the dark, and you can see that it's locking in the focus really quickly despite the different textures, the depths, or even the reflections in the glass that I made it look through. So if you're trying to catch a bunch of different passing subjects in your scene, then you'll 100% catch them with this autofocus. Also, the manual focus is super accurate, and like I said before, the focus ring is very precise with how sturdy yet loose it is to control. Though I'm not gonna lie, it would be really convenient if they added an autofocus / manual focus switch on the lens, so you don't have to keep going into your camera menu to switch the lens from auto to manual, but that's not something hard to deal with. That's just like a customer satisfaction thing. But yeah, basically when it comes to focusing and even just general manual focusing tricks I use in my shots to get really cool in different shots, this lens is always on my camera 100% of the time. Now, one of the most decisive factors as to why I highly recommend this lens is because of its price. So for this focal length, which is 28 to 75, a lot of people would be looking at, for example, the Sony 24 to 70, and the lens of that nature tend to cost over $1,800, at least over $1,500. Even the F16 to 35, for example, could be a good replacement to this, but even then, that lens is at least $1,200 plus. And this lens in particular comes in at around $900. And after looking at a lot of different reviews for a lot of similar lenses, I could see no real significant difference between any of them. In fact, it looked like that this lens was basically just as good as any other of the lens. Sure, maybe the G Master lens like the Sony 24 to 70 were like ever so slightly sharper, but that won't make a difference, and you could still very much use this for professional and practical work, not only your creative passions. This lens is way cheaper and it keeps the quality of the imagery. All in all, this lens gives you the most value for what the price point of it is. And the price for this can drop to around $600 or $700 if you get a used one, which is great because you're still going to be getting a great lens for even cheaper. So now that we've gone over the main points, let me just give you a quick summary. Number one, it feels good. Number two, it's a zoom lens from 28mm to 75, which means you can get your landscape and your close angle shots. On top of that, it has a 2.8 aperture, which means you can get great bokeh and blur and get super creative with your shots as you take photos and videos. Number three, the autofocusing is fantastic, so you won't ever have any trouble capturing your subjects. And last but not least, number four, you're getting the most value for your buck out of this lens. So if you guys learned something or enjoyed that video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And more importantly than that, I just love to have you guys on my YouTube journey with me. If you guys have any questions about this Tamron lens, let me know in the comments below, or even just any general camera gear or filmmaking questions. So yeah, that's it for this video. I upload every Wednesday morning, and I'll see you guys next time.